everybody. It's volleyball night, and my person that would normally do that is playing volleyball, which is a very good thing. There isn't a whole lot we can talk about as far as I can tell you, other than we had sports that started last week, which was awesome. We had a football game at Sandy M Christian that didn't go quite the way we'd like it to go, but that's okay. There's always a good starting point, and we've had a couple volleyball games, cross country. So we're starting to ramp things up. So it's pretty exciting to see kids in our building again, and it'll be nice to start seeing kids in our building that are more so than just lippy, but that are actually in the building all together. So I think that's where I'll leave it at, and I will tell you the rest in my presentation coming up shortly.
All right, thank you. Any questions for Mr. Peterson? All right, go Trojans. And then Mr. Moffitt with athletic participation report.
That would be me as well. And that's okay. I'm doing multiple duties tonight, which is pretty common, and that's okay. So you heard a little bit about sports going. Participation seems to be pretty well. When I talked to Moff today, he had to be home. His wife is working tonight, and he's not only watching his daughter, but he's also watching some others. So he's got his hands full. Let's see here. What should we talk about? As far as where we're at still in the county is we're still, I think the most recent numbers came out this evening at about 5 o'clock. Still puts us in the high category. So what we have decided to do at the high school is still not allowed people to come watch volleyball games and people to come attend football games, cross country meets. We're staying in that mode right now until we can actually get into the moderate range. But I know Moth is being creative with having parents work for us. So doing chain gang, doing the chains of football games, possibly sanitizing football. So there might be more jobs to do that we can actually maybe get some parents in there. But we also want to be equitable because we know that parents want to come watch their kids. So just to allow some in and not allow all it's really not equitable. So we need to make sure that we're doing that. Same thing with volleyball. We can have our senior parents coming in, I think is what he's doing right now, and do lines for us during our home volleyball games. So he's trying to be creative, but yet still equitable. So that's kind of where we're at there, and I'm happy to answer any questions if I can.
Do you know the total number of kids that are participating?
Not right in front of me, Mr. Traeger, I'm sorry.
Any other questions?
I can follow up though tomorrow and send y'all an email.
I was just curious how different it was from last year.
Yeah, I haven't seen anywhere. What I've seen, Greg, is the contact tracing stuff for practices. And since we found out that we were actually going to compete, the numbers went up. I think typically what we were seeing in football was anywhere from like 15 to 20 kids that were participating in workouts. Now it's significantly higher. Same thing with volleyball. But now that people are competing, we've got more kids participating. So it is more than what it was when we were just working out.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
Any other questions?
Yeah, Mr. Peterson, do you know if there is anything online about what the current policy of the school district is with respect to sports? Do we have something out there that the public can take a look at? Has it changed since our last meeting?
Something we're working on, thank you on that, Mr. Conklin. Something we're working on is getting communication out via our social media postings, as well as our websites on what we can and can't do with regards to sports. As you know, since the change was I believe it was last week, 10 days ago, lots of chaos has kind of happened with, if you will. I'll just call it chaos just because it's more things to do, and we're working on getting those messages out to again to our social media sites, but we don't have anything right now. So my hope is that we'll have something out by the end of the week.
Good, thank you. That's a question.
You're welcome.
Anything else? Thank you, Mr. Peterson.
You're welcome.
Moving on, we have Steve Kelly with OSBA, who's going to talk with us about our executive search qualities and qualifications. Welcome, Steve.
Thank you very much. I'm going to share my screen. I know the board has a copy of these qualities and qualifications, as we call them, but I'll let the audience see as well. And again, I know you've got a lot to do tonight, so I will be just as efficient as I possibly can. I did send these to you ahead of time, along with the entire online survey that we did. And what I attempted to do was to pull out the top 10 to 12 qualities and qualifications as per the survey and the comments within the survey. And in a couple of cases, I linked a couple of comments or qualities together, like the first bullet, effective communication and listening skills. And these are roughly in priority order. So those at the top had greater number of votes, if you will, than those towards the bottom. The one bullet that I added that didn't necessarily make the staff and community top 10 or so, but it always makes the boards, is around school finance and budgeting. So I added that one because I was relatively sure that you would want to talk about that, but that kind of rounded out the top 10. This is one portion of the law that has to be created, approved, along with a search calendar. You've already declared the vacancy, so that part is done. When we do those three things, then we're able to go into executive session, conduct interviews, talk about candidates, and et cetera, later on in the search. Now, again, these are not all the qualities per se. We're not trying to write a comprehensive list, but really come up with a priority. What are the big things that we're looking for? It's important as we put out our marketing materials that we include these. We also have candidates write an essay on how they meet these qualities and qualifications. It's part of the screening process. It'll also be part of the interview process. We really use it throughout the search. So with that, I'll ask board members, are there any questions that you have and or changes that you would like to make to this document? I know it's an action item later on in your agenda.
Anybody have questions or comments for Steve? I appreciate the list and I appreciate the process of the survey. I think we had, gosh, the number of people responded was 160?
It was very close to 160, counting both the English and the Spanish version. I think we were knocking on the door of 150 to 160 participants.
Yeah, so that's really good information for us to consider as we move ahead in the process. Does anybody have anything they want changed or for sure added or subtracted? Go ahead, John.
I have something, and that is that based on our population being having a lot of Hispanic and minority influence, that effective communication and listening skills, I wonder if there's a way to tweak that to do, have a valuation on bilingual or history in a district that has a lot of that. That is that I think our district is unusual and that needs to be considered.
It's a great comment. Look at the third bullet. I'm not quite sure this hits at what you're saying, but it's a bit closer.
Nice.
The culturally competent at the last part of bullet 3. Again, may not be the best place to put it. I could put it with number 1, or we could, again, tweak the language a little bit to get more closely to your comment.
Well, I think I did not give credit for seeing that before, Steve, so thank you. I do believe that moving it up would be, that's where I see it. I see that needing to move up.
Okay.
Hey, Steve, this is
Yes.
Rob. One of the things that we've struggled with in the past is getting enough feedback from minority groups. What percentage of the 160 or whatever was minority groups versus white?
Well, I don't know that because it was really based on the language. We had a Spanish version and we had an English version. I'm sure we had plenty, I don't know about plenty, but we had some, maybe many minorities that chose the English version.
So we
Tell you
don't,
that
we don't
the
know.
Spanish version had 6 respondents and 140 plus on the English side. But in terms of a minority breakdown, I don't have that. We didn't ask that information.
Okay. It would be nice to have that because we don't get that in, a lot of stuff, right? It wouldn't surprise me if 80 to 90% of the feedback in the survey is from white parents.
That's right.
I mean, that would be pretty typical for what we get.
Yeah.
So I don't know that this reflects really our whole district, I guess. That's a concern, at least of mine.
I perceive that also, but I also see that this is a train heading down a track. There's only so much we can do. And that we are the masters is wrong. We are the conductors on this train and know who our passengers are. So we don't have to speed through every place that's other than a town. We can slow down to let people on. And that's what we're doing. And that's why we put this in, and we're trying to get that up into the number 1. So ICE will get on that.
And I appreciate that, the question and the comment. And there will be room as we design the process for involving community members. So we can target specific people as we move ahead in the process. But yeah, that's a good point.
And thank you. And thank you very much. I was going to make the exact same point. One, the number of participants that you had were above average for what I have seen for your size community and doing these surveys. So again, we had a pretty good response. Again, can't speak to the minority piece. But as was already mentioned, when you design your screening committee, as we'll talk about later in your agenda, there's another opportunity to make sure that you have a good cross-representation of your community.
Thank you. Anything else on this list? I think it's a good, I like it. It's a good list.
It is.
All right. Thank
All
you,
right.
Steve.
Thank you very much.
All right, moving on to Troy with hybrid planning update.
Right. So we've been busy with the transition. As you know, we started St. Mary's last week, and Jasmine and her staff down there have been adjusting daily to the adjustments, and our middle and high school buildings continue to plan. All of our blueprints are currently posted to the website and have been submitted. And so they're just in the process of implementing and the final preparations for the starting of hybrid for the next group of kids, which will be next week with our second graders. Dale referred to them earlier. The statewide metrics are going down. At the county, we've been going down for about 3 weeks, and then seen just a small increase last week in our metrics, but we're still in the high risk, but I think that we're getting closer to getting out of the high risk. Still allows us to bring in our elementary kids as planned on our schedule, or on the metrics schedule. And again, this is the front page of our website that we keep this metric up there and updated each week so that folks can see where those targets are for us trying to reach that less than 100 to get us out of the high risk area. Here's those models again. We're currently operating in this tan or light brown second from the right column. And that allows us to start with elementary in person. And then of course, as we get closer to the 200, we can start transitioning to the high school or the upper secondary. Again, I mentioned, and this will be posted on the website so the folks can just click the link and go directly to our operational blueprints. The blueprints include everything that you're seeing here and more detail, but it's in the ODE language. It's not in the user-friendly form. So you have to read a lot of print in a small area. So we're giving you the easier version. And with that, Jasmine Winslow, do you want to take over for St. Mary's?
Absolutely. All right, so just to reiterate, I think we talked about this last month, but our class sizes, we're getting pretty near maxed out in our physical spaces. Our K1 class sizes are maxed at 16. Second grade, we're trying to get up to 20. The picture on the left shows you one of our second grade classrooms is being set up in our library. Because it's our largest space. And so we're able to fit 20 students in there. And then third through fifth grade classrooms, only 18. But those classrooms will only have half of the students. So they have two different cohorts, half of them attending Monday, Tuesday, and the other half attending Thursday, Friday. So those are larger class sizes, but we're able to do it because only half the kids are in. So we had a fantastic first week in hybrid. Everyone is just so happy to see kids back on campus. You could see a picture there over on the left through one of the kinder classrooms on day one. And the kids have been phenomenal. I think the kids have adjusted so quickly. It's the adults that are trying to catch up. But over the weekend, I did survey our families just to see, if they'd like to offer some feedback about how hybrid is going. And 60% of our K1 families responded, which is quite good. Our families are tired of filling out surveys for sure because of all the information we're trying to get from them before their kids come back. So 60% was great. Of those that did respond, 87% report that their students are excited to come to school and that their students feel safe at school. And really, those are the most important pieces for us. We want kids to want to be there, but we also don't want anyone to feel unsafe. And again, I think it's part of the adult worry that, all these precautions might make kids feel a little uncomfortable, but they have adapted so quickly, and we're so happy to have them back. So in the survey, I did ask for things that families thought were going well, and then things that they thought could be improved. So if they're listed on the going well side, these were stated multiple times. So I only put things that were recurring. So communicating processes and changes to those were listed, being flexible. There were many people that said we're definitely doing the best we can. So we're going to take that as a win. And that safety was going well for students. So that's important. The could be improved ideas. For the most part, we had many that were just sort of singleton ideas, maybe particular to a family or a student. But the things that were noted more than once was, again, communication. Two people said that communication could still be improved, which that's just an ongoing piece that we continue to work on. And then 9 families mentioned the pickup process. So it's funny because we have the same process in the morning and in the afternoon. But in the morning for student drop-off, things were going very well last week. I think families don't arrive all at the same time, so it allowed things to flow well. But in the afternoon, where families tend to arrive at the same time, we started to get some traffic backed up on College Street. And each day we made adjustments and we tried to do what we could within the parking lot there at St. Mary's. But we just were not able to improve it enough to not block traffic on College. So if you go to the next slide, I'll talk about, we've made some updates. So before we were having families enter and exit on College Street, kind of come in and do sort of a horseshoe shape and then exit the same way. And that was just causing too much of a backup on College. So after visiting with the police chief and just getting some ideas about how to improve traffic flow, he said as many right turns as we can possibly have is what is going to help us make it work for the majority of people. So we moved the entrance from College Street up at the top there over onto Elm Street. So we're actually routing traffic back behind the school, as was done in previous years on Taylor Street, taking a right turn onto Elm, where we're having to ensure the traffic is to the left of the bus loading zone. So that's, a little bit of a challenge there. And then circling the traffic across and into that pickup drop off zone in front of the school building, and then exiting on College Street. So today was our first day. We hate to make changes in traffic flow, but we knew that it was better to do it now while we still only had the K-1 students in person, so really less traffic. And today went so much smoother. So we are really happy with how that change has been going, and families we talked to were really pleased with it as well. So, we shall see as we increase the number of students and families in cars, but for now it's going well. So starting next week, we bring our 2nd and 3rd grade students back in person. Again, 2nd grade is the last grade where we're able to do 4 days a week. And 3rd grade will be in the 2 cohorts. So the Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday group. And then we were able to bump up the start date of our 4th and 5th grade students to March 29th. So those students will actually start the week right after spring break. So I'm sure we'll maybe talk a little bit more about it later, but the governor's recommendation on Friday sort of solidified some thoughts that I had going as our kinders and 1st graders were doing so well. We were kind of thinking about, could we bump up those the 4th and 5th graders? And so it just makes sense, and we're really excited to have them in a week earlier. So yeah, I think that's about it for St. Mary's.
Thank you, Jasmine.
Any questions or comments for Jasmine? Sounds like it's been a good week with the kids back in the buildings.
Oh, it's so great. Yes,
Good.
Everyone just has smiles on their faces all the time. It's so awesome.
Thank you. Anybody have anything? Thank you, Jasmine.
Thanks.
Mr. Tiki?
Yeah. So middle school, still planning on those A and B cohort models, 2 days on-site, 2 days off-site. Probably the biggest things pulling out of this is that health and PE, or PE in particular, will still remain at a distance. And so if I hadn't said that before, it continues for all grade levels 1 day a week, but just due to classroom capacity, we're going to still do that at a distance. And so Ms. Kukar is working with our ELA team to embed that within normal ELA instruction, and kids are having a great time, and our staff are having a great time joining her in those efforts. And we'll go on to that next slide because I'll talk about cohort packets or parent packets here in a little bit. Class sizes at the middle school are nearing those maximums, very similar to what Jasmine was saying. Most of our classrooms are sitting around that 16 student maximum. And so you can see 7th grade, we're right at those levels. 6th and 8th grade continue to be a little bit under it. But we're going to continue monitoring that as it, as time progresses and we see enrollment numbers and who might be staying at a distance. We will still be maintaining the bell schedule that middle school students and families are experiencing right now with both A and B lunch options. Lunch will occur in students' 4th period classrooms, and it'll be delivered to the actual classroom and be monitored within those locations. And so not a lot changes with the actual bell schedule, but yeah, it's going to hopefully provide a consistent routine for students and families. We'll go on to that next piece. We have begun limited in-person instruction, I think, since we last met. Cohort 1 on Tuesdays and Fridays has about 20 students that are confirmed and actively attending. Cohort 2 on Mondays and Thursdays has about 18 students. They're broken into grade level cohorts. So we have 6 staff members currently working with students. in those classrooms. And we also have some students actually coming for limited in person during the school day. And so I want to say in total, we've reached out to well over 50 families, and about 30 to 35 took advantage of that opportunity. And so we're excited to have them on site and being able to provide that academic support as needed. Return to in-person learning surveys. These were sent out previously, and this is a great opportunity for students and families not only to tell us the instructional model they hope to remain in when we get the opportunity to return to in-person learning, but also to give us an idea of transportation needs and how students are going to be getting to and from school, as well as a food services survey so that we can make sure that meals are available to all students and families who may need it. All right, so last week we actually sent home parent packets. And there's a lot of information just on this cover letter that I'm going to go through with you one by one because there was multiple pieces of paper within those parent packets that families should be getting any day now. So Troy, I'll have you click first. The first thing that families are going to be seeing is what cohort their student is assigned to, the days that that cohort meets, and that hybrid start date. If you click again, they'll see the entry and exit locations for their respective grade levels, and then a map of the Mount Angel Middle School campus and where those entry and exit locations are, as well as a morning and afternoon greeter that will just ensure hands are being sanitized as students enter campus and they head to their first period classrooms. The next section of this letter just gives students and families an idea of some supplies and resources they'll want to have with them at school each and every day. Most importantly being probably a water bottle that they can fill up if needed, but also being sure that their Chromebooks are fully charged prior to arriving on site so they're ready for instruction in first period. The next section there is some health and safety reminders. You'll see in that box that is highlighted, I also give directions on how to access the Mount Angel School District in-person learning handbook for students and families to get a little bit more information on protocols, arrival and dismissal routines, things of that nature. It's about a 16-page handbook, and so we tried not to overwhelm those packets, but it is available on the district website. And then within each of those packets, there's some forms that we're going to be looking to get back. The first one is in-person instruction, student health and safety agreement. The second one is a parent guardian acknowledgement form, and then an optional consent to testing form on site. And the middle school will be holding paperwork drop-off opportunities on March 10th and 11th this week. If students had expressed interest in participating in a sport, which we had about 95 students express interest in participating in spring sports, we included athletic paperwork in those packets as well so that we could get those as soon as possible and get kids going. Like I mentioned, 95 students expressed interest, and the breakdowns were as follows. We had quite a bit of baseball and softball interest, and so those are going to stay at 7th and 8th grade, while soccer and track and field are going to be 6th through 8th grade co-ed. Soccer is going to begin this week, and so we actually held a parent meeting right before our school board meeting tonight just to give families a little bit more information on that. And season 3 sports begin April 5th with the first week of competition the week of April 12th. And that is it for the middle school at this time.
Thank you. Any questions or comments?
Hey, Jared, this may be a question for all of the principals, I guess, but are we assuming some percentage of the students aren't coming back when we do our planning, like in the class layouts? I thought you said something like that.
Yeah, for the middle school, I'm anticipating all students come back. The information that I'm getting at this time is about 10% are choosing to stay at a distance at the middle school. But to be honest, we're even having families second guess that and call back and say, actually, we would like them on site. So we're anticipating all students will return on site and moving forward with that assumption.
So you have space, physical space for that to happen?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Rod. Any other questions or comments? Thank you. Plans look good.
Thanks.
Mr. Peterson. you're on.
Okie doke. Rod, I can answer that question at the high school. We've had our in-person parent learning survey that's been out since February 23rd. We've gotten responses for 142 students over 100 and almost 180. 40 students are staying in CDL. So they're going to be staying home, accessing their learning via, live streaming. And then right now, the number that I have is 143. No, excuse me, that's 143 total. So that's going to put us right about 103 right now that we actually have responses from that said they're going to be in school and hybrid. So we still have, roughly 35-ish that we haven't heard from yet. So my plan, and so that's roughly 28% of our kids staying home for CDL. Thought that's kind of a high number, but as we started looking around, I know there's some, North Marion High School had some really big numbers of kids staying home doing CDL rather than coming on campus. So we're reaching out individually to each one of those parents of the 35 that we don't have. So 28% is where we're at the high school right now. So as you can imagine, that has an impact in our building as far as the number of kids that are in physically in classrooms. So right now, I only have 5 class periods that are right around 20-ish kids, which is pushing our number. Our number right now, as far as maximum capacity in our classrooms, is about 15, give or take 1 or 2. So, but we also have a couple areas that we could use. The gym being one where we could actually bring some kids in and actually hold the classroom in the gym. The commons being another area that actually is set up because it actually has a projector screen on the wall with a projector in there. And then also Miss Coons's room, which is the old library. We're looking at potentially having to move staff around depending on the number of kids that are in their classroom. So if that makes sense. All right. I'm sorry. Let's jump into so I'm going to kind of give you an idea of our reentry plan. I wanted to put together a spreadsheet. So our bell schedule is staying exactly the same with one difference, which is we're adding a B lunch. So, and it's not because of my marvelous scheduling back at the beginning of the year when I put my master schedule together or my bell schedule together. It just, this is how it fell into place with where I had the advisory. So first lunch will be at 11:35 and 12:05. During that same time, so let's use an example of, let's say our A cohort, which is freshmen and seniors, okay? That's what our A cohort is. That was communicated out last Friday. So freshmen would have lunch at 12:35 to 12:05. During that same time, our seniors would be in their advisory class, and then we would flip it. So then our freshmen would have advisory at 12:10 to 12:40, and then our seniors would have lunch at 12:10 to 12:40. Same thing on the other day with freshmen, or excuse me, with sophomores and juniors. Same thing. So here's what we can kind of expect. This went out in a documentation in a newsletter that I sent out a while back. So I don't necessarily like to call them expectations, but our daily routine. So once students are on campus, they'll need to wear, as we all know, they'll need to wear a face covering and stay socially distanced at all times. And as you can imagine, us all being social human beings, we love to clump together. And that's kind of what we found out when we brought our Lippy kids back, is when they came into the building to sanitize their hands, they all came in together in a group. So so we're going to have to explicitly teach them, and the kids that are coming in now are doing a great job. So as students enter the building and exit the building, they're using predetermined locations. So our 9th and 10th graders will be using the main entrance, and then our juniors and seniors will be using the entrance by the ag room. So as students enter the building, they're going to be sanitizing their hands. And as they enter each one of their classrooms, same thing, they'll sanitize their hands as they come into the classroom. It is a closed campus. We need to have our kids on campus and in control of our kids where we can actually see them. And students will be eating lunch in the campus or in the gym. Water fountains will be turned off, but our bottle stations will remain on. So students are highly encouraged to bring their own water bottles. Lockers will not be used. And again, students will be encouraged to bring their school items in a backpack. And if one's needed, they just need to let us know because we can make sure we can get them one. All classrooms are sanitized after they're used at the end of the period. I'm thinking we might change that now that we've got a little, we've got some definition on the guidance with as far as students being able to sanitize classrooms. What I would think is going to happen now is the students enter the classroom, they'll get a sanitizing wipe down their table, wipe down their chair, and I think that's probably what we're going to end up doing. At the end of the school day, students need to leave right away unless they've already made arrangements with an adult, a staff member, or if they're in athletic sports. And then they just have to follow the guidance or the directions of the respective coaches. And then, as always, teachers are available to help students. Really what we need to do, though, is make sure that we make appointments so that we're following that guidance back up in the other bullet, which is making sure that we leave campus right away. And as usual, just don't hesitate to reach out if we have questions. So I'm going to kind of walk you through some pictures that we took. These are, I appreciate all the work that Brianne Simpson has done in the building, setting this up. She's got a background in hospital work, and so she's very familiar with how to set things up. So example, there's our signs for our entrance for our 9th and 10th grade students at the front of the building, and then also at the doors by the egg room. So these signs are posted throughout the building. Stop if you have symptoms, face shields, face coverings are required. Why do we need to sign in? And then some things that like keep classes on campus. It's all about what we all do to make sure that we're able to stay on campus. So social distancing, hand hygiene, and masks required. These are all signs that Brianne pulled off the CDC website or other websites that would actually match kind of these age appropriate parts of our building. So once entering building, as they come into the building, students will see signs like this that tell them to stop and wait until the next person in front of them has moved through. It's just one of those things that we need to make sure that, again, they'll be an adult at the building, or excuse me, at the front of the building, welcoming students, and also screening as kids are coming in. So as they come in, they'll need to sanitize their hands. So they'll come in and there's a foot pump on that contraption that's there, and they just sanitize their hands. And if it's the beginning of the morning, they'll swing by and grab their breakfast as well and go to their first period class. But it's just kind of wanted to show you some signs or what it looks like. We've got lots of signage on the floors, and we call these traffic flow signage. As you can see, we've got stanchions that separate the hallways. You're constantly staying right. And all kids have to do is look down to see which way they're supposed to be going. So then you come to these roundabouts, which we have a few of these in our building, and they can be kind of confusing. I'm sure there'll be people that want to cut through, but we need to make sure that, again, we're modeling appropriate behavior, that all staff is doing the exact same thing. We're walking around these things. Brianne created a video today that I'll be working on getting out as well. So, and then again, signs that keep to the right, keep to the right. So this one, the one in the middle is one looking down towards McKenna's room, which is the old library. And then the one on the very far right there is looking down the main hall. Hand sanitizer. Every room has hand sanitizers in there. So as kids come in the morning, all they got to do is push on that and they get their hand sanitizer, grab a wipe and sit down and clean off their area. So they're all there. And all we have to do is Mauer will be taking a look at those in the evening once people are gone and make sure that they're full. So classroom setup. I should have taken a picture today because Mauer actually taped taped off, or what I call gridded off a classroom, much like you saw in Jasmine's presentation earlier. This is what you could typically see in a classroom. These are 5-foot desks. And some of the challenges that we have, this actually is a science room, is those sinks that are immovable. They're right smack dab in the middle of the classroom. So those are a barrier to getting more kids into a classroom, but we're working our way around that as well. And then the other science classroom. Mr. Grant Henderson and I and Maurer have taken a look at this is Casey Yarn's room, and realized that we might be able to get 6 kids in here because all of those things are not, they need to be in that classroom. It's really set up as a lab. Those tables at the end of the fountains can be taken out, but then where will kids sit then? So again, it's that 35 square foot per person requirement that we're having to follow. So that's kind of it for me as far as kind of a day in the life of a staff member or a student at JFK. Any questions?
Question, when students are entering and there's a staff person there, if the staff person perceived that person seems to be coughing a lot, or I don't remember her complexion being that red, how are they going to handle that? Are they going to push it to a nurse? Are they going to handle it themselves? How is that going to go down?
It's nice in that way because we'll actually have more than one staff member at a door, John. So one staff member would, inconspicuously pull the person aside and ask them how they're really feeling. And then maybe we have 2 areas that students can go to and staff can go to. One is called our health room and the other is called the isolation room. The isolation room is for somebody that we know is having primary symptoms of COVID. So they're going to go in there, and there's different protocols that we would use for that room versus somebody who might have some secondary symptoms that we might be asking more questions about. And how are you feeling? Do you have allergies? Or things like that might causing people to sneeze or runny noses. But yeah, it's that idea of making sure that we have somebody there that's screening, as well as somebody there that's welcoming.
Good, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? All right, looks good. Thank you, Dale.
You're welcome.
All right.
So just a few more slides to finish out the hybrid presentation. Some of these are reviews, some have been updated, but you heard a lot about the class size limits and caps, and these are going to also impact our ability to accept transfers, because we're not going to be able to really accept transfers like we have in the past, at least for the remainder of this year. So we're getting exact numbers for each space so that we already know that 2nd grade, we cannot accept transfers for 2nd grade, because if we have move-ins, we have no control over move-ins. We have to find this place for them. And so we're working on plans within our buildings also for what if we have move-ins in spaces where we don't have the space within a classroom. And because we do not want to get ourselves in a situation where additional students moving in limits our ability to continue with at least 2 days, or in the K2 levels, 4 days a week. Live streaming up and running at the elementary school, as you heard, and they're still getting set up at the secondary level to make this work. It's a great opportunity for kids who are at a distance to be able to tap into the live instruction that's occurring in the building. It does have some limitations, of course. It accommodates families who are not yet ready to come in person, which you heard some of the percentages at the other schools, as much as 20 to 35% at some of our grade levels. And it's important to know that once you do have teachers in that classroom, their primary responsibility has to be the physical monitoring of the kids that are in the classroom. And so occasionally they're going to walk away from the screen. And we've already heard, that some of the younger grades, the kids will actually get upset because where did my teacher go? Or I have a question. And the reality is we're just limited from a distance. So There'll be times when the teacher's there the whole time and they can respond to all students during that day, but there may be other times when that teacher's attention is drawn away to someone who's actually in the classroom has been a limit. So we're working through that process. It's a learning process, of course, and it won't be ideal, but it's certainly better than not having that live instruction on the days when they're at a distance. And again, we're working on also third bullet there, working on individual student needs. So we know we have students with different needs. We're trying to individualize our plans as best as we can as they continue to review literally every day that we go through. Erica, did you want to address CTP program at all?
Sure. So we currently have a morning and afternoon cohort. They have moved to attending every day except Wednesday remains asynchronous. As we look to move to hybrid, they'll change from 2 hours every day to likely about 2.5 to 3 hours. We haven't determined that yet, since we do have students who have a drive from Cascade, but we're working on that through our blueprint. Our main focus still continues to be on those that we can't teach through technology. So it's actually a technology-free time except for their AAC devices. Next slide. So the rapid on-site testing, we've had 13 staff trained district-wide. We have, another training set up for next Monday for our coaching staff. So we'll have quite a few staff trained district-wide should that be required if we move back up to extreme. The third bullet here, tests now that different forms have gone out to families. Testing is optional. Parent must provide consent. There is no like opt-out form. So parents, the way that they would opt out is to simply not return the consent form. Next slide.
All right, thank you, Erica. Transportation is a constant. Every day, we're constantly having to make changes with students, and we're having a really difficult time getting hold of some families to get to confirm whether they're going to be using the transportation or not. And so Sue and her staff are working hard to make sure that we're limited to about 20 kids on the big buses. And so they're having to add routes, which does cause some staggering of arrival and departure times. But so far, it's going well. It's just going to be a lot of consistent changing as we get additional kids coming in our buildings. Meals as well. As we continue to add, it adds to our the way that we are delivering meals and the number of meals that we're preparing. And of course, we're going to continue delivering. We're going to move that delivery date to Wednesdays because that's when we don't have students and our transportation and kitchen staff are available to provide those boxes for five days of meals. And that's what we have for the hybrid update. Any questions?
Is this the time that for asking about the governor's new guideline for putting people into school and dates by she'd like to see? Was that able to affect any of our getting people in?
So our schedule was already on track, except for we didn't have the 4th and 5th graders come in until April 5th originally. But as you heard Jadman allude to it earlier, she was, after seeing that first week of K1 and having her building prepared and ready to go, they were already thinking of moving that grade up, but we were not able to move any other grades up at this time.
And that was the question.
And we're in compliance with her.
I know we're in compliance, and then what you just said, the answer I think was that currently we're not, the junior high nor the high school is in a position to be able to move. And that's because of COVID stuff?
No, that's because we're just not prepared. I mean,
Okay,
the physical arrangement of the classrooms is just not there yet.
Thank you.
Yeah, and you're hearing they're just getting the cohorts together.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, we are on the shortest timeline we can go on right now without, with just knowing that we can get the number of kids in those spaces.
Hey, Troy, one of the concerns I have with the amount of kids that'll still be CDL is there a way to provide support in the classrooms for the teachers for the technology piece of it to help with the CDL kids?
Well, we actually are in the, well, more at the elementary level, of course. But yeah, they do have IA support in some of those classrooms. So it's just not all the time. And so there may be an aide in the classroom for part of a period. And so, you know, they can only support during that amount of time.
Is it possible to bump that up somehow with students doing that or volunteers doing that? It just seems like that's a big load on the teachers.
Yeah, it is. And I know Jasmine is working on volunteers right now. And we're reaching out, trying to get additional staff just as subs. One of the biggest challenges of this whole thing is we don't have substitutes. The few that we've had that are really good are being hired out for long-term sub or permanent jobs. And so it's very limited. There's nobody out there you can't just call and get a sub anymore. If you have, for example, you know, an elementary classroom and that teacher calls in sick at 6:30 in the morning, we're stuck. And so we're working on those processes, but it's very limiting, and especially the high school levels where it's the higher content, even more difficult. And so we're trying to figure out a way to, potentially have the kids in the classroom, someone teach from a distance the other way around, to where they're offsite, potentially teaching in the classroom with an IA that's there to supervise during the instruction. But substitutes are we had that talk again this morning. It's a real serious concern because once we get our folks back in the buildings, we need them there every day, and we don't really have a good source of folks to cover for us. So, I'm not sure if I answered your question, but we're working on providing additional folks to cover.
And Troy, just piggybacking on that, so is there enough space for a volunteer to help out during?
Not always.
That's the issue. I'm
A good example would be a second grade classroom.
Yeah, right. I mean, if we're at max capacity, we can't really bring in any volunteers. So it'll be a case by
But
case,
there are permanent
classroom by
classrooms that
classroom.
we can. So a good example is the high school. The high school, you heard Dale talk about his numbers being fairly low, but a kid could have a schedule, and they do, especially our kids who take advanced classes. They could go to a science classroom that's full. They can't get another kid in there. And the next classroom is calculus maybe, and there's only 6 kids in the whole classroom.
Right.
And but you can't bring in more because they won't fit in the next period.
Right.
So, it goes up and down, especially at the secondary level.
Thank you.
Some of those variables that they're having to work through.
Well, some of those aides or the volunteers and such, I would imagine can help via a Zoom setting, and so they don't have to be in that classroom, but they can help be working with kids maybe that are at home or, on their asynchronous days and such.
The challenge is that obviously with the hybrid protocols in place, we need everybody to help with supervision when supervision is in place, and that pulls away from the classroom as well.
Yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? All right, it's exciting. We're getting kids back into our buildings. Okay, moving on to approving the agenda. So no changes. I would fill the motion to approve the agenda.
I move that we approve the agenda as stated.
A second.
Okay, Teresa moves and John seconds. I don't need to call the poll. All in favor? Aye. All right, passes unanimously. And consent items. Does anybody need to call out anything on the consent items? Okay, I would, again, if anybody wants to make a motion to approve the consent items as presented.
I move that we approve the consent items as presented.
Thank you.
I second that.
Second, any discussion? All in favor? Aye. And no opposed. Wonderful. Moving on to reports, and just for the public's awareness, after our reports, which include administrators, superintendent, and board members, the next agenda item is the public forum. So if anybody does want to sign up to address the board, now is the time to use the chat function to let Jill know that you would like to address the board. And those are limited to 3 minutes. Okay, so moving on to administrator reports. Do we have Jasmine going first again?
Yes, yes,
All right.
there, you found it. Okay, perfect. So as I was reading this, I see some things have already changed since we wrote this last week. So we do currently, actually last week, had 27 students attending limited in person. So we are continuing that through this week and even while we're starting hybrid up. But transportation is going to become very complex next week. So we will pause that next week while we make that transition. The K1 hybrid, so you were asking about numbers earlier. So in particular for the kinder and first grade classrooms, it gives you the numbers of the students in person and then how many are remaining in CDL. Of those 8 students that are remaining in CDL, we've already had 3 of them contact us and want to shift into in-person. Many of the families were just feeling uncomfortable at the beginning and wanting to see what it looked like and, you know, wanting to kind of give it a bit of time. And so we're excited when we can welcome them in and have the space for them. So far, so good with our K1 students. As I mentioned earlier, we were working on our pickup and drop off process to minimize disruption of traffic. And so we have already made those changes. And we are no longer planning an additional pickup drop off area near the old gym. So we're kind of rolling everyone into just the one process. But our families and students are doing an excellent job of helping us follow routines for safety. It's, you know, it's a big task to ask an entire school building, you know, to change processes so quickly. And so we've been really pleased with the help and support that our families have given us. And the kiddos are doing amazing. And, you know, they like to share their cool little masks with us and show us how, you know, their little Mario masks and things like that. But they're doing awesome and really playing right along into the new processes. So we've been really pleased with the progress there. So, ma'ams.
Thank you, Jasmine. Any questions before we move on to the middle school? Again, thank you. Okay, middle school.
All right. Starting with attendance, our attendance since we last met has gone up about 2 to 3% to 85.4% there. What really stands out to me with this is that generally in years past, we've seen 8th graders be the group of students that attendance starts to kind of trend down towards the spring. And so we put different incentives in place to try to encourage participation. And we're seeing that they're staying actively engaged, which is, you know, attendance in general. This is a huge testament to my staff. They're absolutely amazing in how they're continuing to provide instruction and the effort that they're putting forth each and every day to meeting the needs of the students in the classroom. So happy to see attendance progressing and trending in the right direction. As we talked about, we have multiple cohorts of students attending limited in-person instruction. So 33 students were in attendance when this board report was made. Return to in-person learning surveys were originally sent out on the 26th, and we had 65 responses to date at that time. Just a friendly reminder to encourage families that as we continue to send those out, if you can get us that information as soon as possible, that's really helpful in our planning process. As you saw in the PowerPoint presentation, cohort letters and return to in-person instruction packets were sent to students and families last week. And we will have drop-off opportunities both on Wednesday and Thursday this week from 4 to 6 p.m. One other caveat there is that on Thursday, March 11th, we also have our picture retake opportunity. And so if students and families are interested in spring pictures and want to have a retake, that will also be available. I'll have Erica, I believe, scroll down, or it might be Troy. We had quite a few students interested in participating in sports. And this is something that has been in the works for a little while. And you don't see track and field because I just added it today. But Mount Angel Middle School, one of the things I've noticed since I've took over is we did not have middle school specific gear. And so we've partnered with Gear Up Sports, and each and every one of those links, Troy, I don't know if you want to, can you click on volleyball for me? Each and every one of those links will redirect you to a specific site that has gear representing each and every one of our sports that can be customized with last names on the back, different color combinations to represent our colors, and even stay in line with JFK colors if that's something that you're looking for. And so we're really excited to get that in the hands of students and families, and have actually purchased about 25 t-shirts, just general middle school t-shirts to hand out as incentives in upcoming assemblies. And if you want to toggle back to the board packet.
You toggle back.
It's a
here.
tab.
Right at the top.
I'm actually sharing. This is Erica. So
Oh,
I'm not sure what you're seeing. I have the full page up there.
Oh, then you might have it. And last but not least, we have yearbooks that are going to be available. Miss Arndt has been doing an amazing job getting that together and working with our leadership students on that. And so online ordering will be available through April 15th. So if you are interested in that, that will be included in the next Wolfpack Press.
Okay, Jared, we're gonna hold for a second. Troy, if you click on the X, are you running that?
Right here.
Yeah, click that. There we go.
Okay.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay, go ahead.
I see both of them sharing, so I was like, I don't know quite which one I'm seeing.
Yeah.
And then a very special shout out to our digital instruction specialist, Brielle Karcher. She has worked tirelessly to get our staff set up, and I just want to really, extend a special thank you to her. She has gone above and beyond to try to prepare us for hybrid instruction as soon as possible. So, any questions for the middle school?
I'm not seeing any, so thank you very much.
Thank you, Jared.
And moving on to Ms. Peterson for Kennedy.
I think you might need to scroll up a little bit there.
Oh.
There you go. There you go. Right there, Troy.
That's it.
I was a little worried there when I wasn't seeing the board report because I don't actually have my paper that I have all that stuff down in front of me. So I'm like, oh my goodness. But I want to go back and answer Greg's question. This is what you do when you don't have that is like, Moff, give me some numbers that you have as far as sports participation right now. And he was able to text me back. So sounds like we've got about 32 folks that are playing in football, got 15 for volleyball right now, and this is all season 2 stuff, right? And then we have 8 for cross country. So what is that? 40, 55 folks that are out of the 178, 179 students right now. So that's some pretty significant participation there, which is fantastic. So let's dive into mine. So I want to thank Moff for getting back to me real quick. I did say, could you just shoot me an email note tomorrow so I could actually forward that information on to our board, but here we have it. Okay, so attendance comparison. Q2 versus Q3. Q3 really just started. We're only a couple weeks into it. But so if you look at those 9th, 10th, and 11th and 12th grade, we've got some improvement with our sophomores, which is great because that's a big class. We've got improvement with our juniors, 4% improvement. And we also have improvement with our seniors. And our seniors, I kind of will go with what Jared said a little bit ago. Our seniors have a tendency, since I've been at JFK, to kind of not lead the pack when it comes to attendance. And especially this time of year, they get a little maybe senioritis, but I think we've got a fantastic group of seniors this year, and they're certainly leaders. So I'm excited about the work that they're doing. So the one thing that we know as a constant is the work of school, or the business of school, does not stop when you're in the middle of a pandemic. It just adds more to your plate. So with regards to scheduling and cohorting and class sizes and blueprints and all those things, we also on top of that have we've got scheduling for next year that just started last Thursday, because we really need to make sure that our kids have the right schedules. So we had our first ever, and I very much hope so, our only virtual future freshman night. And I say that in all seriousness, because it is much better to be in front of our kids and our parents than it is to be virtual. So I really hope this is the last time we have to do this. And attendance was okay. It's not surprising that we didn't have, I want to say we had about 25-ish kids and parents that were showing up, which is way less than we had last year when we, just before the pandemic started. I remember this, we had just gotten back from the state basketball tournament that the girls had won. We had future freshman night, I believe it was on a Wednesday, and we shut down on the Friday. So we were able to get that in and work on that. So we've got that. And then we also have budgeting that's due on Friday. So lots of things still happening. So when we think about master schedule planning, I've talked to a lot of people outside of our district about what could we expect for next year. And so what I'm going to do is exactly what I've had to do since March 13th of last year, is double up the work. So we'll be creating 2 master schedules, one with a typical 7-period day, and then with our common 4-period day that we have right now. The people that I'm talking to in other districts and even our ESD are saying you might want to lean towards the 4-period day that we're in now. And that I just cringe when I think about that, because I want all kids in the building at all times. So, but I'll do it. I'll put everything together, because the last thing we want to do is make last minute changes if we don't have to. Lippy, we have 28 kids that are attending Lippy. So we've got 2 groups with McKenna and Rachel, and 2 groups with Autumn Traeger. So it's really cool to have. And of course we have football, volleyball, and cross country season. We talked about that a little bit earlier. The one cool thing is the staff who've been in the building, and maybe it's just periodically coming in, because it seems like most of my staff are still working from home. But when they do come in and they see volleyball practice happening or football practice happening, the one thing they do comment about volleyball, which is it is so great to see kids in our building. And I can confer with what Jasmine said. I'm sure her staff's saying the same thing, which is it just brings a smile to our face. So all the hard work that we've done since March 13th of last year is coming to fruition now. So we're getting kids back in the building, and we're doing it safely, and we're making sure that we're using all the mitigating factors to make sure that kids and staff are safe. So super excited about the work we're doing. And I also want to give a huge shout out to McKenna Coons, who is our digital learning specialist at Kennedy, because she also is going above and beyond. The work of a special education teacher is difficult enough anyway. So she's taken on that role as well, also as a cheer coach. But she has begun working with my staff with live streaming tools and technology, and will continue to do so this week and next week. So we're prepared for kids to come back on the 29th. So super excited about those days.
Thank you.
Take a breath, Dale.
Any questions or comments for Dale? Thank you. Okay, Erica.
So quite a few of these things we've already touched on. You have another attachment in your board packet, which is our fiscal risk assessment, which is kind of a summary of results of a report that Gail and I completed last year. We rated a 2, and there was a possible score of I don't even remember, it was a year ago, but it was I don't know, 40 or something like that. So we were rated very low. And I will just read that it just says that it was based on the combined source suggests that our district is a minimal risk of fiscal instability. The score was calculated using a result of the fiscal risk assessment and ODE's records, including documentation submitted with award claims and any single audit findings available at the time the fiscal risk assessment was submitted. As a result, no additional technical assistance is required and no action is required from the Mount Angel School District at this time. So that is excellent news for us, especially as a small district. You know, oftentimes we have some stuff come back just because of the size of our district. So that's really great news. In TAG land, I know Jasmine and her staff have, I feel like they're just keeping everything at the forefront. They are doing really fantastic things. We're already looking at how we can look at doing the universal screener for our second graders. So that is in process. And then at the secondary level, we're working on the SWAL, which is school-wide EL. And so that both of them have plans where we're looking at professional development and partnering with the ESD on that. I'm going to go ahead and cover the general because it really has to do with me. You already heard about the rapid testing, but our wellness grant is up and running. Cameron, as well as our 3 building-based champions, are just doing a great job. We have the official paperwork signed on the dotted line for our grant, and our first challenge is going. The thank you that I and all the rest of the admin have there is a thank you to our classified staff. We could not do this without them. They were certainly the backbone of the operation. You know, when we first went into the pandemic a year ago, and if you follow us on Facebook, you saw last week was actually Classified Appreciation Week. And so if you haven't had a chance to please thank one of our classified staff, our maintenance staff, our kitchen staff, our instructional assistants, our bus drivers, all of those amazing people, our clerical staff, etc. As you know, we just have amazing staff here at Mount Angel.
Thank you, Erica. Anybody have questions or comments? And just want to reiterate that a 2 is good, right? On that score. You don't want to be in the 40s. You want to be at that 2. So that's amazing. So well done. Thank you. All right. Superintendent's report.
All right, we'll pull up another slideshow. It's everybody's favorite these days. Some updates for you. On our health and safe schools, healthy and safe schools plan that we have on our website. We provide the results for lead and radon testing. Those have been completed through our CAP grant this round. Those results are posted on our website so that you can access those. The 2 CAP grants for the facility assessment and the long-range facility planning, which are both the BLRB was awarded the contract for both of those. They're in the process of selecting committees right now and getting that those meetings set up. And then our seismic assessment with ZCS and Zach Stokes Engineering, they're actually scheduled to do a full walkthrough on this Wednesday so that they can start their assessment process. And just as a reminder, all 4 of those grants are need to be completed by December of next year, or December of this year now.
Of this year?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Troy, are you needing any outreach for the committee selection for the?
Yes, yeah, they're gonna try to put together a similar committee they did last time, and I believe Grant's gonna reach out to some of the members who are on the original committee as well.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Vaccinations, our staff successfully completed the 2nd round on February 19th. And I want to put a big shout out for Jim Treeweiler and and Vic Hofer and all their staff down there who, this is a volunteer clinic. And so providing us with that access was, I think it was a key piece of us being able to move forward as quickly as we did with our teachers. So I want to thank them for the time and effort that they put in helping us get access. We think about 60% of our total staff had the second round of vaccine. So that's really good news for us. And then I didn't get a chance to read it, but I heard it came out today. The CDC is providing new guidance on face masks and the impact it has on staff who are working together who have been vaccinated and past that 2-week time period. So it eases off the requirement for face coverings, but I don't know the specifics of it. But we've been told that there's going to continue to be emerging updates based on the number of folks who are vaccinated. So we'll be watching that. Bargaining, I know it seems like we've been bargaining for 2 years, but because we have so many MOUs, but this is the initiation of our succession bargaining. Classified, we will start on March 17th. And just as a reminder for the board, bargaining in our district historically has not included a board member with classified. We bargain internally, but then we bring those proposals to the board. And then licensed, we currently have John helping us with license bargaining, and we're going to start on March 10th. We're going to go every 2 weeks, and starting March 10th, and same thing with classified every 2 weeks. And the licensed process will be by Zoom from a distance. There's a very large group that is bargaining. Required instructional hours, as you might guess, we've been hit this year, the three waves, the fire and smoke, and then the outages right after the Christmas break, and then a couple weeks later, the outages, recent ice storm outages. And so and it being late in the year, we're stuck in a situation where we really can't make up all the student hours that we need to. We don't have an accurate number yet. We're working on it because of the fluctuations in hybrid and the days. We want to make sure that we're accurate, but we know that we're not going to meet those hours. And so I reached out to ODE, and there are several districts in our area that are doing the same thing. We apply for a waiver, explain how we're going to build in days next year into our calendars to try to prevent it from happening again, which you can't stop everything. But so we're working on that application and having a plan for next year. One of the challenges right now that we're dealing with our teachers is trying to make up the teacher days, because we're already, because of all 3 waves that we've dealt with, we're already going until June 25th. And we don't really have any time in that following week because our administrators and our office staff need to finish up the year after the staff have submitted their grades and left. So we're going to be working with our licensed staff to figure out how we're going to make up. There's 3 remaining days that are missed, and I'll show in the calendar presentation later the specifics on those. Curriculum adoptions, another thing that has dropped because of the pandemic, and that is OD postponing the ELA and ELD adoptions for this year. They were not able to get their caravans together and get the materials approved. So that's been postponed for another year, which I think is probably a good thing because of the situation we're in. But the other adoption, the world language is still in place. So that's a real small adoption. It's just our language classroom at the high school. So we'll be able to get that without any problem. Federal stimulus, we received what we anticipate, or what the allocation, preliminary allocation is for ESSER 2 for our district. It's $524,572, as you can see there. These are the dollars that we're using for all of the things that we've put in place for hybrid learning, and the new wave of funding also allows us to address kids getting caught up or credit recovery. So we have a district committee, CARES committee, and oversees those dollars, and they're currently We just finished up with identifying the ongoing costs that we're gonna incur until we know that we're completely out of hybrid. And so we're having to be a little conservative there because we don't know when that is gonna be. We're assuming at this point that we'll start up next year in hybrid just to be safe as far as the budgeting is concerned. But we're starting to think about how are we gonna get the kids caught up or get additional resources to the kids. And then on top of that, today was just announced from the state of Oregon, not just governor's dollars, there's a couple different legislative folks that are involved in this as well. But they allocated $250 million summer learning and childcare packages for kids. And that's going to bring dollars into school districts across Oregon to help in several areas. I've only listed 2 of them here. They're really the 2 largest chunks of dollars. But summer enrichment and academic programs for K-12, there's $90 million. And then summer enrichment and academic program grants for high school, $72 million. That's for the state of Oregon and to be used in the summertime. And so to access these funds, the district needs to provide 25% of the total cost, which we can use our ESSER II dollars for. So we can use our COVID dollars to offset that. So we'll be looking at that again. The challenge is that we're going late. We're going clear to the end of June, and we could potentially be bringing our teachers or asking our teachers to come back a little early if we need to do some prep to be ready for the year. So there's such a, and then you have 4th of July in there. We're really stuck with a 4, maybe 6 weeks if you really stretch it. But then the teachers that we're hoping to get to help us during the summer, we'd like to give them a break too. So we're going to be stuck with trying to find staff and time to make sure that we can fit those programs in. But we have a committee that's working on that right now. Budgeting for next year, we're internally just for our what we call 300s through 600s, our supply budgets. We're basing our numbers just on a flat fund because if the governor's 9.1 billion, that's just about flat, meaning no additional dollars. Doesn't even account for rolling up services and contracts. Budget committee vacancies, we have 3 of them. All 3 of the members whose terms expired in June have reapplied. And we still are hoping to get a few more applications, but we'll have that on the board agenda next month for appointment. And Sherry, I can visit with you between now and then as to if you want to bring those folks in to do any interviews or how you want to do the process.
Thank you.
And then our first budget committee is prior to the May board meeting on May 10th. So as we're looking for next year, we started looking and Gail is working with Christy through this transition and she's picking it up really, really quick. And we're really, really happy to have her in our community and going through this transition with us. But looking at numbers, we go by ADMR is your regular maintenance. So that's a number of actual students. And the ADMW is your weighted ADM. That's what you're funded off of. And it includes the weights for special needs, for small schools, for ELD, for all the additional things that go into this long formula at the state level. But this year, our ADMR is 640. And it's going to vary a few because it's always going up and down a little bit, but our funding projections are based on 640.87 and weighted, that puts us up to 850.35. Next year, what we are projecting is our ADMR, or the number of students we have in our district, going up to 685. Now, as a reminder, our projected enrollment for this year was 725 prior to the pandemic. Even though we budgeted after the pandemic, we had no way of knowing what the enrollment would be. So we based this year's budget on 725, and we're right at about 640. But what we're doing is we're trying to guess, and we're guessing that we're going to get half of our kids back that we lost, which is about 75 students that were currently down from a year ago. And so we're gonna project that we'll get half of those kids back the next fall and hope that we're close. So we have, as you would imagine, we've talked about a little bit, is that with reduced enrollment, you have reduced revenue. And so the Star State School Fund for this school year is going to be reduced by about $627,404. Our beginning fund balance for this year was $663,088, and that's that revenue and expense sheet that I share with you each month, where it's projected at the end of the year. And so now the new projection is $383,13. And that puts us at a reduced beginning fund balance for next year of just under $300,000, $279,975. And so with the further calculations, that puts us into a projected shortfall for the start of next year of somewhere around $631,875. So there's a lot of other pieces that go into this, of course. These are just initial projections. To start with, we're basing those numbers off of the governor's $9.1 billion budget. And we have, whenever they're in the legislative session, you never really know what's going to happen until, late in the spring or early summer. But we know that there's a big push to get funding for education up somewhere around 9.6. And that would be enough to cover our shortfall if it was to get there. But there's so many other variables. We're just going to be very cautious and try to monitor as close as we can as we move forward. And then we're not taking into consideration the American Rescue Act, which is the new stimulus bill in Congress. I believe is just about to pass. There's a lot of money in there, but it hasn't been defined or shared how that's going to be distributed to schools yet, or what the uses are for. So we're waiting to see, we have lots of variables. We know that we're going to get all of our SIA budget next year. So that's about a $300 or $400 increase in funding. The plan is to still get our Measure 98 full increase or full funded. And so it looks like the big number to start with, but there's a lot of other pieces that we need to know before we know that we're not just going to go cut $637,000 because we don't know that we're there yet. But that's the reality of the current projection on our general funds.
Is there talk about what's going on with the Student Success Act and the corporate activities tax?
Yes, yeah, that's a SIA. Sorry, that's a SIA. I was referring
Oh, that's
to-
SIA,
yeah.
okay.
Fully funded.
Okay, it's SSA is the
SSA is the
Okay.
act, yeah, SSA.
All these acronyms that.
SIA is a student investment account, which is
Okay.
our actual application.
Okay.
And yeah, it will go, I don't have that number, I shared it last month, but it's going up from about 200, I think 210,000 this year, and it goes up to about 450, somewhere in there. So
Thank you.
we should be. Yeah, the revenue forecast from the state was good. It was good and solid, which means that corporate activity tax is producing the revenue. And I know that their emergency funds or rainy day funds are up, and we don't know how much they're going to use of that yet. So not time to panic, but we're watching it really close. And last two slides, use of facilities. We're going to continue to not allow any indoor use for obvious reasons. We don't have the space and we just can't monitor indoor activities. So this is by outside entities, of course. We're using them for our own, but we're not going to be renting out for churches or YMCA other than our old gym or any meetings inside. It's just not worth the risk at this time. Of course, and then we, as I shared last month, outdoor is going to start being permitted by Mount Angel Youth Sports starting March 20th. And we will limit outside use too, based on community need. Things like, picnics and stuff like that shouldn't really occur if they're not necessary. Till we can get some of the restrictions reduced or relief from them. And then this is brand new. None of the board members have heard about this yet, but had a gentleman by the name of Al Morelli, who owns the apartments right behind the
Cemetery.
cemetery right here. There's a lot adjacent to him. I guess it's the same lot on the other side that he is selling. And it's landlocked. The only way they can get to that is off of East Markham, past the well, if you will, the city well. And so just had a conversation with him last week. Have not talked to the city or county yet. I just wanted to run it by the board to let them know that that request is out there. And they intend to build more apartments, but they can't do that unless they have an easement. I don't really have a strong recommendation at this time, other than I don't think there will be a big enough setback for this is just me guessing from experience with the bond projects. I don't know that there's enough setback for that road to go between the well and the first house on the west side of our property. I think it would probably have to go on the right side of the well, which would then put you. That's just my guess, but that would not be ideal.
It gets you pretty close to the.
And if it's apartments, it would be
Yeah.
pretty high traffic. So, but I can certainly look into it and see what the options are.
Yeah, I don't know if we want it, even if, I don't know if we want to give them an easement.
Yeah. So like I say, until you have all the facts,
Yeah.
you can't really make an informed decision. But I'd be happy to gather more information.
As part of the more information gathering, how much you're willing to pay for it?
Yeah, well, yeah, they would have, the board would have to determine what they wanted for it.
Right, good.
And then set the provisions for what kind of improvements would have to be there.
Then he has to work through the city, the planning, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah.
That would be all their work, yeah.
Yes.
Expensive, that whole part floods. We used to joke that that's the middle school river in one times, because it would just be this, you could see there, they would have their hands full.
Yeah, before they put in that new drain system.
Yeah.
Upgrade. And I don't know, if you remember right, when they were doing that upgrade for the middle school, those big, what do you call it, cistern, kind of the cistern, the big tubes, they go almost to the well down there.
Yeah.
I can't imagine that that's something that can be driven over, but
Yeah.
I can just look into it.
All right, questions for Troy?
So I have one that went way back in your presentation. And maybe we can talk about it when you get to the calendar, but did we still have some dates in the calendar that we have filled in
We did,
at the end?
yeah.
So we're just talking a couple days here that we're doing a waiver for, not for all of the days that we've missed.
The waiver is not for days missed, the waiver is for hours, not meeting the minimum hours for instruction. The days are for staff, contract days. So there's two separate issues.
Okay.
Two separate issues, but I can cover them more detail.
Okay.
Anything else for Troy? Board member reports? I just want to remind people listening and people in the room that we have 3 positions on our board that are up for election on the May 18th ballot. And the deadline for filing for running for office is March 18th. And you do that through Marion County Elections. So if you're interested in being a board member, you're welcome to talk to any of us and check it out at Marion County Elections. Anybody else have any board member reports? All right. Okay, we are now at the public forum portion of our meeting. And I want to mention that this would include everything on the agenda that includes the qualifications and qualities for our next superintendent. Just want to put that out there for people if you want to comment on that. We have 1 person signed up so far, Andrea Fowl. And so while I'm reading this, if you want to address the board, now's your chance to use chat to let Jill know that. Individual comments are limited to 3 minutes. If more time is required, please submit comments or questions in writing. At this time, members of the public are invited to present concerns to the board. Speakers may offer objective criticism of school operations and programs, but the board will not hear complaints concerning individual school personnel. The chairperson will direct complaints to the appropriate means for board consideration and disposition of legitimate complaints involving individuals. And in plain language, this is an opportunity to address us, and it's not usually engaging in discussion with us, but just sharing information with us. And that said, again, we have Andrea, who has signed up to speak to us tonight. So Andrea, whenever you are set up and ready, I will start my 3-minute timer for you.
Good evening, Superintendent Stoops, board members, staff, and community. First off, I want to say that I have a kindergartner who started school this week, and I just want to say that he loves going to school. For him, it's a seamless transition. So I want to thank his teacher, Christy Seiler, as well as all other staff members at St. Mary's who have put in countless hours planning for the return of schools. And my second grader looks forward to returning next week. A couple things I want to ask to look at. The cohort groups. So for example, if a family has a second grader, their student's going to go to school on Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday. If they have a fourth grader, that student will go Monday and Tuesday. If they were to have a sixth grader, that student would go Monday, Thursday, or Wednesday, Friday. And so this has potentially 3 different schedules. I would like the district maybe to look at possibly having 3rd through 12th grade having the same cohort, whether it's a Monday, Tuesday cohort, and then a Thursday, Friday cohort, or possibly a Monday, Thursday cohort for everybody and a Tuesday, Friday cohort for everybody, so that for parents, they can have less changes in their schedule, potentially have 3 different schedules for their students. Second, when it comes to making up school days, I get that we've lost a lot of school days due to things under or out of our control. Has the district possibly looked at taking some of the asynchronous Wednesdays in the schedule and taken the Friday that the students don't have school? For example, next week, students don't have school on Wednesday because it's their asynchronous day, and then they don't have school on Friday. So possibly making that asynchronous Wednesday now a student contact day to make up those hours, as well as looking at April 23rd is a grading day. It's a Friday, possibly looking to making that grading day on the 21st, a Wednesday. So teachers still get their grading day, but students don't lose another day of contact time. That's all I have. Again, I want to say my kids or my son has loved going to school, and I'm sure all teachers loved seeing them in. So thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you very much, Andrea. Anybody want to make any comments to what Andrea said? All right, thank you. And Jill will run in if anybody else is signed up. I'm not hearing footsteps, so. All right.
I don't have anyone else signed up, Sherry.
Thank you, Jill. Moving on to our selection process for our next superintendent. So we have Steve Kelly, who's going to walk us through some stuff. I'm thinking.
All right, there we go. Sorry,
Oh,
lost my button. Sorry, you already have it up there. This was the, and I apologize, it says superintendent/principal. I used an old template. I know it's a superintendent search, but what you have in front of you is one of the 3 requirements for the search process, and for us to utilize executive session as we will do throughout the search, especially in the beginning portions. March 8th, this is what we're here tonight. If you'll scroll down just a little bit, again, I won't go through all these dates. Hopefully you've had a chance to check these dates. It shows here when the advertisements will begin, how long the marketing period is. Right now it's March 11th through April 15th, 5 weeks. We'll come back on April 19th is when I will present the candidate pool to the board, and I assume a screening committee. I know that's something we're going to talk about later in the agenda. the use of a screening committee, how many, what the composition will be, but that's a bit later. That's what you see here on April 19th. Then you have several days, not quite a week, to evaluate all of those applications. And I come back on April 28th to give you the results of those application reviews. The board then chooses who they're going to interview from that candidate pool, from that feedback from the screening committee. You'll see May 5th through the 8th. We won't use all of those days, but I generally set aside a block of 3 or 4 or 5 days to schedule our interviews. And generally speaking, the number of interviews run anywhere from 5 to 9. It can be a little more than that, but I would say that's probably the average range. Once the interviews are conducted through the 5th through the 8th, the board will then choose its finalist, which is anywhere from 2 to 4 candidates usually. And then May 17th through the 18th is what we call our finalist forum. It's usually one of those days, not both. And we bring the finalists into the community. And we have a second interview. We have a meet and greet with your community, tours of the schools usually. And again, all very COVID friendly, if you will. The first round of interviews in all likelihood will be held virtually. Again, that's something we'll talk about, but this final step is where you want the finalists to come in, meet the board in person, do that second interview, view the community, the schools, and of course then have a meet and greet usually in the evening with staff and community members. If everything goes according to plan, then in late May, early June, the board should be in a public session hiring their next superintendent, hopefully to start July 1st. As we've already indicated, with the lateness of the search, there is a chance, depending on who the final candidate is, that they may not be able to start on July 1st. In the state of Oregon, many superintendent contracts have, or many administrative contracts have a 60-day clause. They have to give 60 days notice. So if they gave notice on June 1st, they wouldn't be able to start until August 1st. But we'll problem solve that if it arises. But in a nutshell, that is the search calendar that's being proposed and is an action item for you this evening.
Thank you, Steve. The only, I noticed, and I should have caught this earlier, but for tonight, the first 2 bullets for tonight, hire search agency and declare vacancy, we've already done that. So, which is fine. We're just not doing it tonight, but everything else, I think is pretty well accurate. So I don't know if we need to change that or not, but.
It's not necessarily, but you're good to note that.
Yeah, just calling it out. Anybody else?
Hey, Steve, there's a lot of precision built into your calendar. Do you usually keep it as precise as that, or do these dates end up moving around on us?
Generally speaking, they do not.
Okay.
It's very difficult to move these dates once they're established, because we have a lot of people, the board, the screening committee, we put it in our marketing materials. So very little, if any.
Okay.
Good question, Rod. Anybody else have questions for Steve or comments?
Comment just that the identify potential screening committee members is on there for tonight. Are we prepared to do that?
Tonight, we're going to talk about the composition, not the names of the individuals. I'm going to talk you through a couple of different processes in which to identify your screening committee members. If you'll notice on the calendar, it is set for April 12th.
Okay.
That's when the board will actually name names on April 12th, where it says select screening committee members. I think that is a regular public meeting for you. I hope, if I looked at your website correctly. That's when you name names. Tonight, we're just going to talk about how many, what's the composition, how many staff members versus how many parents and so forth. But we're not naming names tonight.
Okay.
Yeah, good question, Greg.
And next month we'll name names and select, or are we going to start that in between, or is that all next month? How do we get the names?
I'm going to walk you through that process, but the short answer is I have an application that you can adapt to your school district, and essentially you publicize, let people fill out applications. The board reviews those applications on the 12th, then you make your selection. That's one way to do it. That's the most popular way to do it. But again, I'll walk you through the process a little later in your agenda tonight.
So any other questions or comments about the calendar itself? So let's, somebody want to make a motion to approve the executive search process and calendar?
I move that we approve the executive search calendar as shown and provided tonight.
I second that motion.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. All right, we're good to go, Steve.
Great, thank you very much.
All right, moving on to adopt qualities and qualifications for the executive search.
Because there was one minor change to the document, moving a phrase from bullet 3 to bullet 1. Other than that, your Q and Qs were unchanged. So unless there are any additional questions for me, that is also an action item tonight.
And just to be clear, Steve, when you're doing the marketing materials, so based on our conversation and what we mean by culturally competent, you know, the makeup of our students and our community, it's quite diverse. So just, you know, that's something of importance for us as we consider who the next superintendent will be, right? Yeah.
Absolutely. And as part of the marketing materials outside the Q and Qs, my colleague, Sarah Herb, will be in touch and we'll get demographic information. We'll get that description from you. We'll make that very clear in our description as part of our marketing materials.
Great, thank you. And thank you for bringing that up, John. That was a good catch. Does anybody have anything they want to change before we approve and adopt the qualities and qualifications? So does anybody want to make a motion to adopt the qualities and qualifications as amended?
I move that we adopt the qualities and qualifications for executive search as amended.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. Any discussion? Okay, all in favor? Aye. And I do want to thank those in our community. I saw a lot of students actually completed the survey. So I just want to thank everyone who took the time to provide this input to get us to this point. It's very helpful and very valuable. So thank you. All right, moving on. Steve, you're off the hook until later on in the agenda. So Troy, adopt revised district calendar for 2021 school year. Boy, maybe this will be the last time we have to look at our calendar. I'm not saying volcano or earthquake.
We're breaking a lot of records that we never wanted to break. So quick address the question that was asked earlier about the days. Yes, we originally allowed that week in June, I believe it was the 21st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th as 5 alternate days for calendar dates. And so we've pushed out, we've used 3 of those, actually used 5 of those. But right now, what I'm hearing from my administrators and my office staff is that 28th, 29th, and 30th, if we were to bring those back as kid days, that would push us out beyond July 1st, getting grades and master schedules and transcripts and the end of the year reports that are required before they can leave, turning over student information systems, for example. So I'm hesitant to go any further than 25th with staff. So what this current proposal is asking is simply adding March 19th as additional contract day. It's currently has been a comp day. We call it comp day because teachers at work in previous years they worked parent conferences for 2 12-hour days. In this current calendar, which has been revised a couple times, it includes virtual home visits at other times of the year. So that is truly a comp day for those 2 4-hour evening time periods. So what we're asking is to add it, and that's been requested by MTA. They've asked to do that as well, or agreed to do that. And so we would like to propose just adding the 19th as an additional contract day. The other changes that don't need board action that we're working on, or we've already worked through, is let me finish license first. So license, that leaves us with 3 more days that we do not have in our year for our contract teachers. And we're not in agreement yet of how we want to do that. So we're still working on that because we need to provide time within this current schedule to make up those 3 days. And we want it to be meaningful, and we want it to be work that is good for our kids. And so we're just not there yet. So that will come back to you next month for action. But for this calendar for our licensed staff, just the 19th is being added. For classified staff, their contract is real clear that if we miss days due to inclement weather or disasters, we provide them an opportunity to make up those days. If we're not able to provide an opportunity for them to make up those days, they get paid for them anyway. And so what this proposal does is gets us 3 of those days back. And that leaves them, they already had 1 day that they hadn't gotten put back in the schedule from the other 2 closures. And so we're proposing to add our classified staff to March 19th and April 23rd, which is a teacher work day when classified don't normally work on those days. And then the last day of school, which is June 25th, which is usually just a teacher work day as well. So we're going to add opportunities for classified to use those 3 days to make up 3 days. That leaves 2 days that we have not used. We don't know that we can provide an opportunity for them to make up those 2 days. So there's a possibility we may be paying for 2 days that we can't provide them an opportunity. So, but that doesn't require board action. I'm proposing, yeah, that's it for separate item.
Anybody have questions before we make a motion to adopt the revised calendar? Anybody want to move to adopt the revised district calendar for 2020-21 school year?
I move that we adopt the revised 2021 school calendar as presented.
Second.
I'll give it to Greg. So John moves, Greg seconds. Any discussion? All right, all in favor? Aye. All right, and I think that was unanimous. So moving on to the district calendar for next school year, which is right around the corner.
So these are the same 2 proposals you see last month, and I'm just proposing that the board adopt in anticipation of getting back to normal in the fall, adopting draft 1, which is includes our early releases and our late starts like we had pre-pandemic. In the event that we find out mid-August that you're not able to return to hybrid, or you're not able to return to in-person completely without the restrictions, then the second draft is the exact same calendar as we have this year. Same start and stop times. It does not include the early releases or late starts because you would be, again, operating with the Wednesday as the professional development day. So they're both there, and be happy to answer any questions if you have it.
I like the idea of adopting the optimistic route of the first one.
And it is really a simple transition if you don't.
Anyone want to move to adopt that calendar?
I move that we adopt the calendar with the real one going first and the hybrid as the backup for 21-22.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. All right. Passes unanimously. Okay. We're bringing Steve Kelly back to discuss the executive search process, calendar, QOQ, all that good stuff. So welcome back, Steve.
Thank you very much. So these following items are discussion items and only discussion items, but they are primarily around your screening committee. And first, before I assume, because that always gets me in trouble, I assume the board would like to use a screening committee. What I mean by that is usually 10 to 15 people, somewhere in that range, from a variety of roles, from a variety of schools and job classifications to assist the board in screening the applications, giving feedback to the board, and if the board would choose, observe the first round interviews. And again, give feedback to the board. Now, I'm very clear with screening committees, and almost in every search that I do, there's a screening committee, that the role of the screening committee is to give feedback, not to deliberate, not to make decisions. That is the board's role. So I just make it very clear, this is not 20 people trying to decide who's going to be the next superintendent or who to interview or whatever. That is reserved for the board, but the role of the screening committee is to provide feedback to the board. So my assumption is the board would like to use a screening committee. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes. You have 5 yeses. Yes.
All right, good. I assumed as much. Let's talk about the process for selection. A couple of different ways to do it, but I will say the most popular way, the most transparent way, is as I started to describe earlier, I have a template, an application template that can be modified. And I'll send that to whomever you ask me to. I think Jill is your board secretary, is that right?
Yes.
And given some of the information and some of the questions that I'm going to ask over the next several minutes, we'll go into that document. Excuse me. So you have an application, you advertise it, you give a deadline, and then in your April 12th meeting, you take all those applications and the board as a whole would choose who would be on the screening committee. And we're going to have a conversation tonight about your composition, you know, the number, how many from which buildings, how many parents, staff members, and so forth. And then the board will use that conversation from tonight to fill out this selection committee. Excuse me. That is the process that I would recommend, basically using an application process. Let anybody who would like to apply and then choose from that pool of people that apply. What we'll put on the application is the dates for the screening committee, which you approved earlier. That's April 19th, April 28th. And then if you choose, they can be part of the interviews May 5th through 8th. We put all that information on the application so they know what their obligations are, if you will. Questions on the recommended process?
Sounds clear and straightforward.
All right, then let me ask a few things before we actually talk about the composition of the screening committee. On April 19th and the 28th, it would be best if those meetings could be held virtually. I've done those virtually. It's easy to do the training. It's also pretty easy to have conversations. So in terms of a location, we don't necessarily need to do that, but I just want to verify that we would do them virtually. And if so, what time would we start? Because I would like to put that on the application. So on April 19th, the amount of time needed on the 19th is probably an hour and a half, give or take. No more than 2 hours. On the 28th, that's going to be closer to 2 hours for the screening committee and closer to 4 hours for the board. Thank you for putting that up there. So what time would you like to start on the 19th and the 28th? Those will be special meetings only for the purpose that I've stated here.
I think 19th could be 6:30, just,
Yeah.
it's just 1 to 2 hours.
6:30 in the evening, Steve, on the 19th.
All right, and what about the 28th? And again, 6:30, if that's what's best for everybody. I mean, it could be a late night. I try to prepare you for the worst. I've gotten it done in as little as 3 hours, but it's usually no less than 3 hours.
No, the 28th, we wouldn't start at 6:30, I don't think.
5:30, 5.
5:30 is 9:30.
Yeah. What about, is 4 too early?
What day of the week are we talking?
That's the Thursday, I think.
Wednesday, whatever I got.
It's a weekday.
That's it.
Yeah, I probably can't go early on a weekday.
Is 5 doable?
Yeah.
Can we say 5 o'clock on the night, on the 28th, Steve?
Absolutely. Again, just keep in mind that other people on the screening committee, this is why I want to put the information on the application so they know they have to make arrangements on these dates. So
Yes.
5 o'clock?
Yes.
Okay, that's good because again, it can be a long evening, especially for the board. Again, for the screening committee, it's probably no more than 2 hours, but because they don't deliberate, they get to go home early on that day. Now, the interviews, which are on the 5th through the 8th, we don't know what time they're going to start. We don't even know what days we're going to use yet. But my question to the board, so I can just include it in the application, is will you be allowing the screening committee to observe the interviews?
Talk us through pros and cons, what other districts have done, if you have a recommendation.
I do have a recommendation. And I know how much that you value community engagement because we've had this conversation. I would say 95% of my districts allow the screening committees to observe the interviews because they want that feedback, they want that other set of eyes. And quite honestly, they're going to put in a lot of work screening applications, and they kind of like to see the fruits of their labor.
Yeah.
And again, I'm very clear about their role and the fact that they give feedback and they're not part of the deliberation. I don't really see a downside, to be honest with you. I only see an upside. Excuse me. And two, excuse me. I'm probably going to recommend that the interviews be done virtually for all candidates, and not just for COVID reasons, but we've had a number of out-of-state candidates, and it just makes it easier for everybody all around. And so it makes it even just as easy for the screening committee to observe. Again, those interviews would be an executive session, but I don't really see a downside, and it would be my encouragement for you to do that.
Yeah, I couldn't think of a downside either. Thank you for that explanation. Does anybody have additional questions for Steve on that? I don't see any reason why we wouldn't invite the screening committee to observe our interviews.
They really do appreciate it. And again, it's just another level of community engagement. That's the interview is the second phase of the search. The third phase is the reference checks. Of course, you don't really do that with community engagement. The board does that. But then the fourth phase, there's lots of community engagement because anybody that wants to show up to the meet and greet shows up, meets the candidates, and then fills out comment cards. And the board gets all of those comment cards as part of your deliberation. I will say in the second interview, which is also done in executive session, I almost always encourage that to be the board only. When we get down to the finalists and we've done internet social media checks, reference checks, I mean, you've poked and prodded these candidates every which way but loose. If you have any concerns at all, anything that you need to probe a little deeper, I like for the board to be able to do that without an audience and to feel comfortable that they can have a frank conversation with the finalist. But about every other phase, I encourage the community engagement. All right, thank you for that. Let me speed along because you had a long board meeting. Now for the composition. Again, I would say you can have too many and it can become a little unwieldy. And so my recommendation is always between 10 to 15. And I would say probably 2/3 on the staff, because we've got 5 board members that represent the parents and community members. Now, it's not to say that you want all staff, but I would say instead of being 50-50, I would say think in terms of 2/3, 1/3. You're going to want a lot of staff categories to cover, because you're going to want somebody from administration. You're going to want somebody from the teaching ranks. You're going to want classified and maybe even confidential. And then how many schools, how many buildings do you have in your district?
Three buildings plus administration.
So the other thing to keep in mind is how do we get representation from all 3 buildings? And so a lot of times, just to throw out some possible numbers, and again, when it comes time to fill out your screening committee, it never fits perfectly. But let's say you get a teacher from every building, maybe an administrator from every building, and a classified person from each building. So right there, you've got 9 people. And then you probably have district office staff where you want to get 1 or 2. So now you're very easily up to 10 or 11. And that leaves room for about 3 or 4 parent/community members. So that would be probably my proposed composition for your screening committee. And that right there, we shot up to 15 in a heartbeat. Your reaction, your thoughts, your comments to that?
It makes sense to me.
It feels light on the community side to me. I mean, it feels like a lot from the buildings and light. And I'm not saying that the people that we sent don't need to be represented, but it seems like 3 or 4 community members and a dozen people that are within the school already. It seems a little unbalanced to me.
And I appreciate that. Again, just keep in mind, there's 5 on the board that are solely parents and community members, and ultimately you're the decision makers. So just keep that in the overall balance of things, but I appreciate the observation.
When we're making the identification of who these people are going to be, we're not necessarily required to stick with what you laid out as a template. I believe,
correct.
I perceive where Rod is to be where I am as well. I think it's light on the citizenry, and in coming up with our identification of that, we could make that up.
Yeah, and I appreciate the reminder that we 5 are representing the community as well. So yeah, I think we can shoot for maybe 16-ish. That gives like 11 from the buildings and then 5-ish community members. And so we can have the ish, 16-ish is our kind of target, and then we'll see how applications come in.
And if I was a betting man, you're going to have more than 16. And that's fine.
I'm guessing you're right. Yeah.
And that's fine. Okay. I always say 10 to 15 because my boards always push the upper limit, and that's fine. Let's see how many applications you get. I agreed with the board member comment. No, you're not. That's why we're not making any decisions tonight. That's why this is a discussion. And so come April 12th, look at your applications and just get the best cross representation that you can. And that's ultimately my recommendation is when you sit around and decide. And if you get 17 applications, take them all. If you get 25 applications, you might have to choose a few, but ultimately I work for you and you're going to make the best decision for your community, your district, and I'm going to support it.
Okay, Louis done.
Thank you, Steve. All right.
So I think we've talked about the screening committee. I've got enough information there to help Jill with the application. Excuse me. The last piece that I need is the salary range. We generally put the salary range for the position in the marketing materials. And if I understand correctly, you have a salary schedule for your superintendent. Is that correct?
Yes.
And if I could share my screen, I'll put it up here just to make sure I'm working off the right document. So you should be seeing your salary schedule.
Yep.
And it appears to be from, and I'm going to round this off a little bit, basically 113 to 139.
Mhm.
And so what I'm asking is that the range that you would like for me to put in the advertisement?
Is there, what happens, does the range increase July 1 with COLAs or anything?
It normally would, yeah.
Yeah, so I think we would allow for that COLA, I would think.
Yep.
Whatever that would be.
So it's
If
just
we're
that,
bargaining, so we don't know. I mean, it's a bargaining year. Normally would, if we have a 2-year bargaining, because it's always, traditionally in our district, we've done it all the way through. Whatever the COLA is bargained is.
Is what?
It's carried through.
Is what non-represented get as well.
Yeah. So the board may have to make a change with that at this point.
Huh.
so,
Well, I certainly don't want to bump you from your tradition, and I think we can put 113 to 139 plus COLA
Yeah,
and just leave it at that, because that's essentially your current range plus the COLA for next year. Then they have a general idea of what the range is. So I don't think we've got to get it so precise, but if that's agreeable to you, we'll just use 113 to 139 plus COLA.
yeah, and for the board's information, Troy had a bit of a study done about a year ago on the salary for superintendent, and it fit in with where it should be. So I'm pretty confident with this range.
so once we say this 113 to 139 or whatever it is, are we free to negotiate anywhere within that range, or is it set by number of years or something?
We will negotiate, but yeah.
Okay.
And I don't know, I guess, Steve, what usually happens with, it's based on experience and all that.
Well, to be honest with you, this is the first district that I've worked with that had already had a set salary schedule for their superintendent. And so, yes, you would negotiate, but I'm assuming that you would put them on the appropriate step,
Yeah,
depending on what that means to you.
yeah. So we
Okay.
define, yeah, exactly, and that's based
So
on.
if you had somebody with 0 superintendent experience, I assume they start on the first step or somewhere close to that. Whereas if somebody comes in with 7 years experience, then perhaps they go on step 7. But that's all to be negotiated in whatever your past practice has been.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you. Good question, Rod. Yeah, so is anybody opposed to just advertising with this? Okay, yeah, we'll go with that.
Okay, so it's 113 to 139 plus COLA for the 21-22 school year. And with that, I believe my portion is done. I've got information. I will get out the application to Jill tomorrow. And we'll talk about what the deadline should be and when your board packet goes out, but just look for April 12th to select your screening committee members.
Mhm.
And again, at that time, we should be gathering some information on the application so that you can get a good cross-representation of your community. So I'll add that to the application as best I can, or I'll ask Jill how the best way to do that is.
Mhm.
And unless there's any other questions for me, I think my part is done.
Any questions for Steve?
Nope.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Steve.
All right, you're very welcome.
All right, moving on to item 9.2, superintendent evaluation. So we met in executive session in January to discuss Troy's performance, basically for the calendar year 2020, essentially. And I'll just read the final paragraph of your evaluation, and it's part of our packet, so you can all read it. Your board of directors remains impressed with your performance and with the leadership you provide to our district. Your strength of character and focus on the student's experience, combined with your approach that we all can and should keep getting better, benefit our students, staff, and community. We look forward to supporting and partnering with you to get the results our students deserve. So thank you, Troy.
Thank you.
For your hard work
And your good work.
and your good work, yes. So that's official. I do have the OSBA Promise Scholarship on our agenda for tonight because remember, we have $2,500 remaining of the 5,000 that we were awarded or given by OSBA. And if you remember last time, we had Teresa partner with Mr. Peterson and really chose one based on leadership and one based on someone that
Overcame it.
overcame adversity.
Yes.
I liked that
Oh, I did too.
design.
Yeah. I
Do we
do
want to
too.
stick with that same criteria? And do we want to also stick with kind of relying on the JFK staff and
Yeah.
and
I
Mr.
thought that
Peterson
was a
to
great way to do it.
recommend the recipients? Does anybody want to volunteer to be the chair
I can do
person?
that. I
Okay.
can do it again.
Or the, person
Yeah.
from the board?
Yes.
Perfect. And it's not on the agenda, but Troy, can I add as a discussion item, John's participation with bargaining?
Yeah.
John,
Yes,
how are you feeling about sticking with that role?
but it's fine.
Are you okay with it?
I'm fine.
Okay, does anybody else want to fight John to represent the board? in that
Way too
role?
tough.
I would, no, I agree. Please.
No, and it's gotta be one of those two right now.
That's,
because-
yeah, I
because
agree.
any of the
I
three
was
of us
gonna
may not be
say,
there.
because of the uncertainty of us being
Yeah.
here in July, I was gonna say the exact same thing.
I don't know that I can. I mean, is it a conflict of interest when your son is one of the teachers at the bargaining, or does that not matter?
I think as long as you just recuse, or you just make it evident that it's not, you are a relative and that you continue to bargain. I think that's the biggest
Yeah.
thing, is just making it clear
Yeah.
that there is a potential there, but it doesn't mean you can't.
Yeah.
And I would say if John's willing to continue in that role, I've been impressed with your participation and perspective on it, so I would thank you for continuing.
That's a great job.
All right. Does anybody have anything else before we adjourn for the night? Okay, meeting adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Got a lot done tonight.